Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar sponsored by Version 1 CollabNet, and we're very happy today to be presenting implementing Lean-Agile at scale in highly regulated industries. My name is Mark Dabian, and I will be the host and moderator today. I'm also going to be presenting a demonstration of the CollabNet Version 1 solution in the second half of this demonstration today. Before we begin, I just want to give you just a couple of quick housekeeping things. We will be fielding questions, and we'll be answering them at the end of the webinar. So we have time allotted for the second half there for questions. So please submit those via the chat box, and we'll go ahead and make sure that we get those answered. If we don't answer them in line here, we'll definitely answer them offline and send you details on that. And we will also be sending you a link to the recording. If you want PDU or SEU credit for this, that will be also included in the post-webinar email. So my name is Mark Dabian. I'm one of the Senior Solution Engineers and Implementation Consultants at CollabNet. I just got my 4-year anniversary here, and actually SAFE is one of the reasons that brought me to Version 1 4 years ago. I started doing Scrum Master work and really morphed into a program role, and spent a lot of time using the SAFE framework at the time to make sure that I could get my programs done, and I liked it so much that I decided to leave the company I was at and joined Version 1, and it was really SAFE as one of the catalysts for allowing me to go ahead and do that. So we're very happy to present the demonstration today, and I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Steve, and he is going to introduce himself. So Dr. Steve Maynard is here to go ahead and present, and Steve, I'll just hand it over to you and let you introduce yourself and take it away.
Sounds great, Mark. Thank you, and thanks to the folks at Version 1 CollabNet for inviting me today. Very excited to have this great company as one of our partners, and to share with the folks that are on the call today what we've learned about implementing Lean Agile in highly regulated, high assurance types of environments. Just for a quick background, one of the reasons why this has sort of landed in my area of specialty as a fellow at Scaled Agile is the last 15 years or so before coming to Scaled Agile, I spent working with the federal government across many agencies, so it's not hard to figure out the connection there. Very highly regulated environment, highly compliance-driven environment, and certainly had to learn how to navigate that when implementing Lean Agile practices on development programs. And prior to that, I even worked in commercial, highly regulated environments, primarily healthcare, but also in banking and insurance. So this has been a consistent theme for most of my career, and again, I'm delighted to share some of what we've learned at Scaled Agile about how to implement SAFE in these types of contexts. So without further ado, let's dive in. So just to set a little bit of background, we're going to talk a lot about operating with a quality management system. Now, when we first wrote our guidance on this for the framework, we had to give it a noun, a label that people would recognize. And different industries call this different things. So in your world, you may not call your collection of practices and policies a quality management system or QMS. So insert whatever label is appropriate in your environment. But for understanding and definition, it's that collection of policies, processes, procedures that help make sure that the products we develop meet all of the various safety and efficacy concerns, and they come from lots of different angles, right? So there are laws that many of us have to comply with in building our solutions. There may be some regulations that aren't in statute, but they have a little bit more of, written by the regulatory agency that we have to comply with. It could be industry best practices that haven't risen to the level of law or regulation, but they're generally accepted in our industries as this is the way we have to do things. And sometimes they come straight from our customer, that if we're going to provide a solution for a direct customer, it has to comply with certain requirements. So there's a whole set of inputs And we just kind of give all of that one label, our quality management system, just for ease of reference. So when we think about our quality management system, we also have to understand that there are two dimensions of compliance. So some of those inputs will constrain or govern the actual solution that we build. So for example, on the screen, you'll see some illustrations of, for instance, if I'm working in a financial environment or any kind of environment where I'm dealing with private information, for instance, in the PCI credit card standards, there may be some things that define encryption standards or how data has to be protected. In the automotive industry, you may have examples, and this is an actual example, of stopping distance for a vehicle given a certain speed. And to be sure, your solution has to meet these requirements and will be validated before, for instance, your automobile is allowed to be sold on the market. At the same time, we also have requirements that govern the process itself. Like, how do we ensure the quality and safety of the system that we're building? So do we have documented requirements? Do we have a process for independent verification and validation of conformance to a set of processes or specifications? So those are the two dimensions that are also part of this conversation, both the product and the process. Now, what we know from having worked, and I'm sure many of the folks on this call have lived with this and experienced this, when you're dealing with traditional compliance processes, it certainly does a good job, and let's just recognize that they're not bad, and we certainly don't want to vilify in any way the compliance processes and the quality processes that we've dealt with in the past. Certainly, we all climb on airplanes, which I'll do in a couple of days again. We get in our automobiles. We go to the doctor and get in medical machines, and we do so because we have confidence in the quality processes that ensure our safety. The challenge is as we're moving into faster moving markets, higher competition, digital disruption that's affecting pretty much every industry out there, we all know there is a common need for faster time to market, for agility in being able to innovate and bring solutions faster. And the challenge is a lot of that present need that we have in our businesses runs counter to traditional practices where all of that compliance work has historically tended to happen at the end of development. And so developers, engineers, they work diligently to build some new product, service, and then at the very end, it's run through the compliance hoops. And of course, the problem with that is that tends to lead to this big bow wave of activity at the very end. And of course, if there are problems uncovered, then we have to loop back and try to address those, find out all the places that it impacts. And then, if we didn't plan appropriately, that means we miss deadlines for delivery to market. And that creates, problems both in customer expectation as well as in the publicly traded market if we're a publicly held company. So those are some of the obvious things we all know. And of course, the negative sort of dark side to that is if we don't like the delay, maybe we take shortcuts in quality, and of course, none of us want that to happen. So it just doesn't create a good thing. But there's another thing a lot of people don't think about, and that is the process of having the compliance activity actually can add value to our solution. The people that perform those activities could have insights, they could have a different perspective, they see things that we don't see in development because we've got that forest and trees sort of phenomenon. And we could have taken advantage of that additional perspective early, but because our processes have historically waited till the end, we got no benefit from that additional insight. So these are the challenges, and of course the last bullet there, if you work in the government environment, you know that the traditional authority to operate, that ability to put a solution on the government network, is its own animal and has just unbelievable long timelines and lots of rework associated with that. So this is sort of the world that we've traditionally come from. It doesn't really fit well with the needs of our environments today. So how do we solve for that? And in the next few slides, I'll just kind of briefly touch on what we've uncovered at Scaled Agile that you might find useful. And these are the practices that we have observed and collected from literally hundreds of organizations implementing SAFe in these high assurance, highly compliance-driven environments that we've rolled back into the framework that we hope you will find useful. So let's look at the next slide here. So again, we have to understand that in many of these environments, we have things that constrain and guide what we can develop and how we can develop it, and it comes from all different kinds of directions. It could come directly from government agencies. If we're in transportation, you've got agencies that oversee that. If we're working in healthcare, you've got the different organizations like CMS, and you've got the HIPAA standards and all these kinds of things. So all of that is sort of sits on the front end and feeds into our process. And remember, we talked about these speak to both the product and the process. So what we wanted to describe is how would we build a lean QMS, and what we mean is just thinking about what Lean teaches us in terms of continuous flow of value in smaller pieces, so that we have that PDCA, plan, do, check, adjust cycle that gives us fast feedback that we can then act upon to make immediate improvements and iterate toward the ultimate solution that goes out the door. Well, in our QMS standards, our policies and procedures for how we build our quality management system has to start from the premise that those guidelines have to reflect a lean process. Now in SAFe we have some artifacts that we're going to talk a little bit later about what we've built into those artifacts to help describe what you would do to build a lean quality management system. And of course one of the hallmarks of both Agile and SAFe is that this idea of objective evidence being the ultimate standard, ultimate measure of whether or not we have built something appropriately or correctly. So the thing that you're going to see throughout the next few slides is that we're taking that same thought that has always been present in Agile, that it's better to look at a working piece of software, for example, to judge whether or not our project is delivering what it's supposed to deliver, as compared to just making that assessment based on a set of documents, status reports, or whatever the case may be. So we're going to take that same thought and we're going to apply it to the quality management process, the compliance process, and say, can we have objective evidence iteratively and incrementally as we move forward that we're building something that will meet the QMS standards and will ultimately be approved for release. So on the next slide, this is if you've had any SAFe training, you've seen a picture like this. Many of our courses have something that looks very similar, and it was originally intended just to compare and contrast the basic differences between a traditional sequential waterfall stage gate type of process and the process that's promoted by Agile and by SAFe. So in the top, obviously, you get one bite at the apple in each of the stages, right? We're going to take one shot at requirements, one shot at design, and so forth. As compared to an incremental process where we've got that plan, do, check, adjust cycle going on in multiple iterations, so we're going to iterate our way to the final solution. That's always been part of what we've taught in the world of Agile and of course in SAFe. What we're adding to the conversation here is the little blue ribbon icon that you see added is that the same thing applies to our certification process and our assurance process. In the traditional waterfall manner, it appears one time. At the very end, when we actually have a completed thing to build, that we can run through the certification hoops. In the alternative approach, and again, we have seen this actually implemented. I know on the government side, NASA pioneered this years ago by completely changing their entire IV&V process to look very much like what you see at the bottom, which is where, Agile has always said, let's build a smaller piece of the working final thing. Let's build it so it's a vertical slice, a completely functioning component, and get feedback as to whether that piece is what our customer, our business owner intended. And based on that fast feedback, we can iterate back through and make corrections if we miss the target. Well, since we're building the solution like that, why not invite those that have the quality perspective, the compliance perspective, the assurance perspective, to also take a look at that early increment and give us feedback, not on the total complete solution, but just on the piece that we're building in that moment, so that if they see something that is out of kilter, we can respond to that and make corrections when the cost of change is small. The thing itself is small, so there's less to correct, but also it avoids the problem of having built other features and other capabilities on a defective piece. And so the further that defect goes down the stream, the greater the cost of change is going to be. That's always been true when we're talking about feature functionality. It is equally true when we're talking about the idea of making sure each piece is compliant. And so I'll talk a little bit more in a couple of slides about how we actually do that. So the next slide, so what we're, in essence, and this is the shorter version for today's smaller time box. We have longer presentations of this that go into greater detail. But in essence, what we're going to do is take the verification, validation, compliance work, and we're going to break that activity into smaller batches. And so in the picture here is the example of a typical feature. Whether this is a software system or a hardware-based system, there's some feature of our ultimate solution that we are building. The vertical lines here represent in SAFe what we call the program increment. It's this anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks worth of work that a team of teams is doing to build out this ultimate solution. The feature, so historically would have said this feature has to it has to have meet this certain description. It has certain acceptance criteria. It has benefits hypothesis, and we're going to have some tests that test whether or not the feature meets all of its requirements. All we're simply doing, and what we have seen in the field, is that we're adding to that definition of done for that feature that not only does it meet the feature functionality, but it also has to have the verification and validation actions, any types of reviews, automation. Automation is tremendous in the verification validation world. For example, I've worked in some environments where I've literally been able to take the automated test, sit down with the regulators, walk them through it, and ask them, if we built this test to verify in an automated way that this piece of the solution complies with your requirements, is that acceptable to you? If that test is always run, you're able to verify that is the test that's running, and we provide you with the results. Now, the first time you have that conversation, there's always some suspicion, but over time, what I have seen is they start getting very accustomed to the traditional, red light, green light, stoplight kind of reports of the tests that were ran, what the results of the test were, and as long as they see their tests in the batch, then it increases their confidence that yes, that area of the system is complying, based on the tests that were run, and they're okay with that. They don't have to go in and manually touch everything. So the benefit, of course, is we get visibility and transparency into what's working and what's not working from a compliance perspective sooner rather than later. The more we can automate, that means we can run those tests in a more continuous integration kind of fashion, and we're getting that validation activity more in real time versus waiting until the very end. The inputs into that then become what we call in SAFE the solution intent, all of those requirements that have to be met, and what quality standards we have are part of building and defining that feature. The loops you see here are reflective of the fact that every time we go through this on a feature, we also learn, and that learning is important. So in the verification validation process, for example, on this feature, if we learn that our tests weren't quite right, or we didn't have tests to cover a particular dimension, that's important learning. And we can loop that right back into solution intent. We can loop that back into our Lean QMS so that the next time those things are fed into a future feature, it gains the benefit of that learning. And so the actual compliance and assurance process gets better and better with every feature that we deliver. So how do you make this happen? So there's a great book that I absolutely love and would recommend to everybody in the audience called Turn the Ship Around. It was written by Captain David Marquet. He's a retired Navy captain. He was a submarine commander on a nuclear submarine. He was actually a keynote speaker at last year's Agile Alliance conference. And one of the things in David's book that he described, which I thought was really powerful, and I've experienced it myself, is this idea of embracing the inspectors. Now David, like myself, I was also in the Air Force. I was a squadron commander, and I was living this same sort of story at the same time Captain Marquet was. And that is, we have inspector generals that come into our operations. They run inspections to see if we are operationally ready in our combat mission. Historically, that can be kind of not completely a combative relationship, but it's not a very friend relationship. It's kind of a gotcha feeling. And so what happens is units kind of play this cat and mouse game with the inspectors to see what they can hide and so forth. David Marquet and I and my squadron, we kind of took a different approach, which was understanding that these folks have different experiences, different perspectives. They get to see lots of units. And they learn a lot of things, and they could see things that we ourselves cannot see. And so the approach that I would always take is, hey, when they arrive, we are at full transparency. We'll share the good, the bad, the ugly, the things we're struggling with, the things we think we're doing well, and we build a positive relationship, recognizing that what they do adds value to our overall mission readiness. So you take that same mindset in your own context, whoever is responsible for your assurance process, your compliance, that could be internal auditors, external auditors, just take a different approach and explain what you're doing it, why you're doing it that way, why you think this adds to the quality, that it improves the safety and the compliance of the solution when you're able to see smaller pieces at a time rather than a big thing at the end. And over time, I think you will find, at least it's been my experience, and it was David Marquet's experience, that they are very open to that, and they will be over time willing to adjust their process so that they work in a more iterative way. Now that does take some time, because remember, they've probably had entire organizational constructs and planning constructs that are designed for a big batch at the end. So be patient with it, but over time, I think you'll find that they're really open to that. In fact, I gave this same talk in Silicon Valley a few months ago, and I had an internal auditor type of person in the audience, and I just asked him if your organization took this approach, would you find it would be better and easier for you to do your job in these smaller incremental chunks as opposed to the end? And he said, absolutely, love to be able to work in this way. we can do a better job inspecting the system when we see smaller pieces rather than trying to deconstruct a big giant thing at the end. And so I thought that was a great validation of our concept. So one last slide before I wrap up my comments, and that is in SAFE we have lots of different artifacts, ceremonies, different things that you can build the compliance and assurance process straight into the normal construct of how you operate in a SAFE program. So for instance, backlog and visualizing the work through the items in the backlog and the Kanban type boards where you can see that activity. Can we put compliance activities into a backlog? Answer, absolutely yes. In fact, in the most current version of SAFE, you may notice that next to solution intent, we added compliance activities, and then when you read our description of backlog items, the red enabler items used to be just architecture, infrastructure, and exploration. We've now added compliance as a fourth kind of enabler item. Can we put compliance on the roadmap? Absolutely. We have major compliance activities, planned interactions with the inspectors. We can put those in the roadmap. Can we bake assurance and compliance into PI planning? Absolutely. And throw the doors wide open, invite them in. They may be able to help make sure that our plans account for critical activities that if we don't plan for them, it's going to throw our PI plan into chaos once we discover it in a moment. Solution intent is obviously a clear place for a repository of the artifacts for assurance and compliance. We can demo compliance. Absolutely. That automobile stopping in 20 feet, we can demonstrate that in a demo at the end of the PI. And of course, inspect and adapt, where we continuously improve the process, we can actually ask ourselves, how do we continuously improve our ability for compliance and assurance? And with that, I am right on the dot at 25 minutes. So Mark, hopefully I landed the plane where you wanted it and can hand it back to you to look at how your product can support this process.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Steve. And again, thanks for going over all of that. I think that's really, really interesting. I actually attended the SAFE Summit that we had in Frankfurt, Germany, and solution intent was actually a very, very hot topic for us. I know it came up when we were in our booth as well. So, can you kind of give another example, maybe, of how solution intent can be used? I know you gave the one example. Do you have any other specific examples of how that might be used and how you're seeing that help companies to either deliver the product or the process better?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've always known for a long time that in this high assurance world, those people that have that responsibility for oversight, they need the traceability, right? That's such a big thing. This is what it's supposed to do. Like, automobile needs to stop in 20 feet. What are the artifacts that prove your system actually does it? And it could be models. It could be examples of tests that were run out on a test track. You could have video of that. You could have sensors on the vehicle and on the track that capture data. Where do you put all that? Where's the one-stop shop where an auditor or a quality assurance person can go in and find that end-to-end thread of this is what it's supposed to do, here's the evidence that it actually does it. Now in the SAFE framework, it's kind of a virtual construct. We don't specify a tool or anything like that because we've got great tool providers like version 1 CollabNet that fill in that space. But it's the idea that you need something that serves in that function. So that, remember, this is all about lean. We don't want any waste in the system, including the compliance system. So the faster we can provide these things to the inspectors, the more delay we reduce from the system so we can get our product out the door faster.
Okay, great. No, I think that's a really good way to put it, and I like certainly the different inputs and the way to capture that and collect that. So again, thank you for that. I want to encourage everyone to ask any more questions. Yes, we will be sending out this whole recording as well, so you'll be able to go through all these slides again. But if you do have questions throughout the rest of the presentation, please go ahead and put them in that question box, and we'll try to get to them at the end when we have a little bit more time. So thanks again for that, Steve. So we're going to transition now into talking a little bit about how we take what we just saw in terms of the methodologies and some of the ideas and concepts, and really how do we actually put that into a solution. And today we're going to be walking through our CollabNet version 1 solution. So we really have three main components of this. It starts, and we've always been, as version 1, a very strong agile management solution. So we can break that work down from this strategy level here on the upper left, all the way down through the portfolio ethics features, down into what we like to call the atomic unit of value, or the user story. And we do that with our version 1 solution in various different levels. So we have a portfolio, program, and team level that we'll set up, and we can manage the Scrum work. If you're doing the Scrum Teams XP or Kanban style work, that's going to roll up into your PI plan, or that 10 to 13 week plan that Steve was talking about, and then we're going to align that to our strategy. So we're going to start in the demonstration talking about those levels quickly, but we're going to put a spin on it and really go into some more of that solution intent and how do we track and manage so we can do the auditing and the other governance and compliance pieces of that for highly regulated industries as well. One of the ways that can happen is with your source control solutions. So when we get to the commit part of this, we start building out that code. We can link in with various different version control and source control solutions. CollabNet version 1, we have Subversion and Git in-house as well. So we have additional controls that we have on those to help you with audit and history tracking in a way so you can make sure that all of the changes that are made basically cannot be easily backed out or rolled out if you don't want them to, if you want to be able to preserve the history and those types of things. Once those changes happen, though, we need to integrate those in with some additional plugins or tools, perhaps, build tools like Jenkins, Jira, some other defect tracking tools that might be out there. And then we're going to have the delivery side of that with the reporting and everything that we can see at a high level, so we can track the bottlenecks, we can understand where those processes are. So this is really our end-to-end view and our end-to-end picture. I like it in the V format here, but it also, all of that data that's happening on the delivery side is coming back over into the development side as well. So this is what we'll be covering as part of the demonstration for the next, say, 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll have additional time at the very end for additional questions. So with that, we're going to jump right into the live demo. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And where I'm going to start is up at the highest level there at a strategy view. I just like to show out this specific view here, because this is showing me total value. Total value is what we're rolling up from the epics and features that we're building, and it gives us an overall view. And this happens to be for a specific strategic theme that we've set up in our solution. So at the highest levels, we plan our strategic themes. We break them down into epics and features, and then maybe capabilities and stories. So this is a view that will show me how I've broken down that strategic theme. At the center of this is that strategic theme of innovation. The next level out is the epic level. So when I click on that, that takes me down into the epic level. The red section here, this is showing me my capabilities that we've broken that down into, because we support multi-level epic capability and feature in our solution, so I can drill out further. The different sizes of the pie charts that we're looking at here, as we look at our capability and our features, represents the different size of the work. On the outer ring here, we're looking at our user stories and our defects. So this just allows us to, as we're having a discussion around a specific strategic theme and seeing how we're allocating the work, it allows us to really track and see what's going on. And for you Star Wars fans, we sometimes call this the Death Star report. So this is just one view of that. Again, we want to drill in more detail with a scorecard or other ways to go ahead and see that detail. In order to track that strategy more, we can track it in from a budgeting standpoint, so we can see how well we're doing with those strategic theme segments, and that's what this report is showing, are the individual segments. Each of these represents a specific goal for a specific segment. So core improvement should be at 50,000. Right now, it's at 3.2. So we want to make sure that at the end we go ahead and meet our goal. So it looks like when we complete all of that work, we're going to be at 138. So we're going to be a little bit short of our goal. So in order to get that on track, we need to make sure we add more work in. This is a dollar or a run rate version of that. You can also see this from a percentage or a percent complete version of that as well. So what this allows us to see is that high-level strategy. We're going to break that strategy down and see other details of that. But one of the ways is by looking at it on a roadmap view, and Steve mentioned roadmaps earlier as well. So in our solution, if I go up to the top level here, or you can go up, we can see a roadmap at different levels within our solution. This one is showing it by the strategic themes still. So innovation is on the left-hand side, and here I can break down this specific epic, in this case, into the features that we've planned into a program increment. So this is showing me a 13-week plan, and then I can hover over that, and it'll show me exactly which features are planned into that 13-week plan. This specific report can be exported out as well, but it shows me percent complete in the shaded areas there. That shows me how big each of those features is and whether or not they have a blocking item on that as well. So this is just one of those views of the roadmap to let me see exactly what we're building and what we planned into one of our PIs or those program increments in this case. And that's one view of that. The way we break down the work and when we set up SAFE for an organization, there's a couple ways that I like to do it. In this case, I've got an enterprise view, which is the top level. I broke my enterprise down into the various different portfolios. Sometimes these are lines of business or other funding models that you're going to use. In this case, I've broken this model down, and I've got two different sections here. I've got my solution or my solution intent, and then I've got my release train work. So what happens for this organization, and this is one that I modeled after a big insurance company that I worked with, and is they wanted to actually show their solution. So we can break the solution down into current and future solution. So we can track that solution intent here. And then under the current, and then the work that we're going to do to update or fix or enhance the current solution is going to be tracked under our release trains. So I can track the release trains that are going to roll up from the program increments, and then we're going to associate that work to the work that we're going to be updating in the solution itself. So we can set up different levels, and this is just one example of how you can go ahead and do that. When I break the program increment down further, I can actually go down into my individual releases or my anytime or on-demand releases, which allows me then to not just release on a program increment level, but I can release anytime we get that work done, really. What I want to do now is I want to drill into this specific solution here and show you some of the details of how we've gone ahead and set that up. So when I go to my portfolio tree view of this, in my solution itself, this is where we're tracking for this organization the capabilities. So I've got my specifications, my designs, and my tests that we want to go ahead and execute for this organization. So when I click on the specifications, it shows me the specific system requirements and the subsystem requirements. I can use tagging, or I can actually link these together if I want to create a type out there for these different types of requirements. This is just one way where I can set the solution intent in terms of adding it under the capabilities here, and then be able to track all of that solution intent and manage how well we're doing in terms of completing all of that work. This is where I might also add my designs, and I can also create individual tests as well. So in this case, we're looking at specific regression tests that we've set up. So these are reusable tests that I can use every time I make an update to the call center, and then we can rerun these tests over and over and over again to make sure that either through automation or manually running these tests, that we haven't broken something existing, and then we can add to these tests, whether they be system, functional, or non-functional requirements testing, so we can make sure that we're basically hitting on all of the different areas that we want to do. We can also track our process in here and our policies as well. So if we want to track policies and processes, we can build those into this as well and see those that different levels, and we can track all of that in here. When I open up the details page for one of these, so we can look at the specific details for this capability in this case, one of the things that I hear that we get asked a lot of is about PII and tracking things that might be HIPAA related or those things for our medical organizations. And we have two ways that we can deal with that. Usually what we're going to do is we're going to use a link or attachment, and we're going to automatically or manually add a link in here that will link us to that specific document management control system, which is going to allow us to maintain the HIPAA requirements that we need to maintain. We can put those requirements directly in here, but again, you need to decide for you, and we can work with you on that about how we want to go ahead and manage the specific work in here. one of the things that we do allow in terms of tracking information is putting what we call delivery streams in. Delivery streams allows us to execute certain scripts or run specific details or prevent certain people from being able to approve certain parts of in this case, a capability. So we can run a script that will allow just certain people to do the governance or approval. Or we can create a specific audit report that you can execute either from a script or use a webhook, or there's other details that we can execute there, as well as notifications, and then even sending out a note or a link to your customers that you've assigned to gather that customer feedback that Steve was talking about earlier. So these delivery streams allow us to build in the governance right inside of this model on the different types of assets that we have to go ahead and execute and make sure that whatever we're building here has the right approvals, has the right audits, and we're able to then notify and work with the correct stakeholders to make sure that everything's happening correctly. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my view now. We're going to go back into a safe view where we're going to look at our specific epics, and in this case, the epic view of that, again, this is the work that we're using to update those specific that solution intent. So in here, we've got our weighted shortest job first that we can go ahead and track the details of. All of the teams roll up into our solution, so we're able to track and manage all of the work there. We can also establish dependencies between this work and that solution intent. So in one solution, and again, what we're looking at here is our single solution that we can provide, we can go in and we can track things like those portfolio item dependencies. So in this case, we can look at it from a capability standpoint. We can drill down into the feature level and see where I have feature-to-feature dependencies with those capabilities. We can also drill all the way down into the individual stories or the backlog items and track those dependencies all the way down and see the individual work that we're tracking. In this case, the user stories are the green. There's some blocked items out here. There's features as well. So this is just one view, one picture of that dependency that we can start to look at and make sure we understand how all of this work is interrelated and how it may be impacted if we change something like this specific user story. How is that going to impact upstream and downstream the rest of the work that we have? So that's the portfolio level. The next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is going into the program planning of views of that. So in our solution, we can go down into the program release and we can track the work. Here I've got another view of those dependencies. This is showing me the dependencies on a program board view. So there's that virtual string that we're looking at here. Each of these, the orange shaded boxes here, the shaded boxes, these represent features, and we can see exactly where each of those features are. Looking at the program board, we can track exactly how well we're doing. Are we on track in this case of hitting our progress as well as our capabilities as well in terms of capacity. So we're able to track all of that and understand exactly where all of those dependencies are, and again, this could show us again the links over into the solution intent if we wanted to go ahead and do that as well. To do our 2-day PI planning, we're going to go into our PI release planning here and go right into the scheduling module of that. And in here, we're going to be able to look at the list of the features as I change my view into my art. And this art view is going to allow me to see all of my features that we have ranked by weighted shortest job first, if we're using weighted shortest job first here, and then we'll be able to break that work down into the PI simply by dragging it down and dropping it into the PI to show us the features that we intend to build in this PI. And then when we're doing our 2-day planning, we can break that work down and get specific objectives all the way down to the team level. So in this case, each team has a specific goal that they're trying to achieve. This goal is going to roll up through the stories into the features, capabilities, all the way up to the epic level. By doing that, that'll allow us to do a program predictability report and show how well each of our teams have been doing. And if we look at predictability, this is going to show us across each of our teams how well they've been doing across the past PIs, and then we can use this for future prediction and know how well we're going to be executing. So that's the portfolio and program levels. Quickly, I'm just going to go over the team view. So this is one example of a team view. This is where the teams have planned that work into a sprint. And on the right-hand side, we have our ability to do our inspect and adapt model here. And we're going to go in and do our retrospectives right in here and track all of that work. Now this can be done at an individual team level, or we can do this at a system or an enterprise team level as well. Inspect and adapt and retrospectives are built directly in, and we want to track all of that work so we can get better as we go. When the work starts to happen, we're going to start to do those commits in our source control systems. That allows us to track that work, and we're going to now talk a little bit more about the right side of that V, the delivery side of that. So each of these user stories represents a unit of work with stories on this specific storyboard. When those stories get committed, or they become part of our delivery, they're going to show up on what we call our delivery at a glance board. So on here, we're showing the individual features on the left-hand side, and each of these boxes represents an individual user story, or a defect, or a work item that we're tracking in version 1. But the phases that we're looking at across the top here, these are actually the delivery phases of what's happening in DevOps. So we've broken that work down, we've aligned that work to a specific progression as we complete all of that work, and then we're tracking the revisions, the automation that we're going to go ahead and execute on, and we can actually put governance and controls on each one of these as well as we move forward. So this delivery at a glance view, and we can look at it a couple different ways, can show us exactly where we are, how done are we versus how much we've delivered. And this really allows me to say, okay, we've delivered something into acceptance test. Let me go back to the customer, ask for feedback, and then we can see if was this good enough, can we move this along, or do we need to make additional enhancements on the specific view. So this delivery at a glance gives us that one view. If we want to go ahead and see that inside of the DevOps component, which we call Continuum, we can go back and look at that same view, or the same similar view over in Continuum. So in Continuum, we're going to look at it from a progression standpoint. So in this case, this is one of the first metrics that we have I'll be showing is the flow of that work. So this is showing me where all of my work is, and in this case, 102 stories and 8 defects, so 110 things are in the specific manifest here for this specific package. We can track lead time as well as efficiency. So efficiency shows us touch time, how long we're actually doing something, versus wait time, and we can track that work all the way through. Maybe it's waiting because of a specific approval or a specific action that needs to happen by a governance team or someone that needs to go ahead and move this work along as we move forward. So we have flow and risk metrics where we can track all of the risk associated with this as well. From a risk perspective, we can see things like rogue commits, which is where someone's done a specific commit on code, but we don't know exactly what that's associated to, which user story or which defect that specific work is associated to. So we want to make sure that 3% of that work that we don't know what it is gets associated to a specific user story or a specific defect. In here we can track risk and defects, risk averages as well as value delivery averages as well, and track how well we're doing on that aspect. When I go back to my progression board one more time, this is again showing me all of the work that we have. These are individual packages of work, and then we can track those unmanaged or those rogue commits here as well, so we can see how well we're doing in terms of moving that work along and tracking that work as we go forward. I can also just look at it for a specific package, so we'll just look at it just for web store, and this is showing me where each of those different versions of the code are, and then if we want to, we can drill into the details of that and see those specific views or those specific metrics as we go in. Now, in order to set up this and set up how we move this work along, we would go in and manage the specific packages. And in here, you can configure, and we set up a progression, and you configure the different controls and activities that you want to go through. So in this case, we've got manual activities here, like a check for readiness. We can also do automated activities like the build, and then we put in specific controls that allow you, as you move the work through, to either stop or move forward if you want that to go through automatically. So there's a couple of different ways that we can track and manage all that work. But really, when your teams are doing the work and they're moving the work along through these different phases of DevOps, we're executing specific integrations that allows us to see the details of what's happening. One of the things that I like about the way Continuum works is we can actually bring that work back as I open up a specific integration here. When I do my merge build, I can actually check and do audits back into version 1. So in this case, I can do specific dependency checks here. So I can check that all the work items are done, that there are no incomplete epics, that all the work item dependencies are complete as well, that we have any we've checked all of the blocking issues. So this allows us to go back and make sure that anything that's happening on that left side of that V that we looked at earlier in terms of strategy and planning and all of the dependencies that we're tracking are actually being met, and we're going ahead and executing them, and they're in the right space as we move forward here on this side. So this is a great way to check that work between the left side and the right side. You can also build in, again, any types of pipelines or progressions that you want to go ahead and do in here. We can go ahead and add those in, as well as all the building tools and other ways to go ahead and link all of that together. And this really allows us then, as we go back and look at the a view of a specific package, in this case, to track all of the work as we've gone through the different phases, in this case all the different phases of environments, and then are we ready to move forward. And then at the very end we can do an audit of that, and we can track how well we're doing or what's happened on that specific view. So what this is showing us, this audit report is showing us all of the work as the work has moved through the different phases, who's gone ahead and done the approvals of that work, made sure that each of the different things that we've set up in terms of activities and controls has been met, and that at the end of the day we know all of the work items and changes that have gone through. We can link that back into either the applications and tools that we use to go ahead and execute these, or bring all of that back over into version 1 so that we can see all of that work rolling back up into the highest levels, in this case the strategic theme view of that, and make sure that all that value that we're delivering is being tracked and managed in a complete and accurate way. So with that, that ends the demo portion of this. I know we went through some of that fairly quickly. We do offer a couple of live demos every week, so if you want to see more details on that, or if you want more details or specifics on that, I'd be happy to provide additional details, but I'm going to go back to the slides here. And I think it's time for questions. So Steve, any thoughts or any questions on that before we jump into some of the questions that we have?
No, I know we see several questions, and I'd like to get through as many of those as we can. So let's go through it.
Absolutely. So the first one here is on the SBC4. They want to know which of the training modules did today's presentation come from? I know you have a lot of them. So.
Yeah, sure. So most of the content that we talked about you would find in the large solution lesson in either leading or implementing. Now, not to the level of detail. It's kind of an advanced topic. So we do have other webinars, hour-long webinars that I and Dr. Harry Kahneman, who paired with me to write this stuff, have done, and you can find those on our Scaled Agile YouTube channel.
Great, thanks. The next one is about ensuring that an iteration review delivers the value to the stakeholders in a highly regulated industry. So how do we ensure that we're delivering value to the stakeholders in a highly regulated industry? Absolutely.
So, one of SAFE's 4 core values is transparency, which means that we invite those interested parties in at any level at any time. Now, they may not want to literally sit in every day on a team, but we provide plenty of opportunities for them to see what the team is doing. We provide, recommend tools like what you guys provide, so they can, check the progress from that perspective. But then there's the normal, team reviews that they could participate in if they want to get down to that level of granularity. But of course, the big opportunity is the system demos that are done every 2 weeks, and of course the PI system demo at the end of every PI. I mean, that's the ultimate way to see how is the solution progressing, because you're either you're going to do the demo and it's either going to work or it's not. So that goes back to the objective evidence being the ultimate way to judge how well we're doing. So we make those as open and transparent as possible.
Working software, I think it's a good way to validate whether or not you've done something. No, I completely agree, and I think those reviews and the retrospectives about the reviews are extremely important. Excellent.
Right, and that includes the regulators. If they want to
Absolutely.
Participate in any of those, again, we take the embrace the inspector perspective that David Marquet teaches.
Yep. So another person here, so I have an epic organized around certification work products, specifications, etc. Do I run the risk of executing like a waterfall versus a more continuous flow? And if so, how is this managed?
So I don't know that I would have a certification epic. Probably the only examples that I could see that would even make sense is, for instance, we work in the airline industry. So I get it. If you are, Airbus or Boeing, and you've got the final plane that has to go through all the final check rides and things that the FAA and NTSB require, then that could be a big enough thing that it in itself would be an epic. But there's really no other way to do that, right? We're talking about an airplane, and you can only fly it when the whole thing's functional. So some types of industries and environments, that's just going to be a necessary evil, and it is what it is, and we just try to make it as lean as possible. When we're talking more software kinds of things, I would really encourage that you bake as much of that in as possible. Yes, that agency may still require some type of final review check at the end, but as we teach in the longer version of this presentation, our aim is to make everything so transparent and so iterative, and they've seen so much of this along the way as we've built it, that by the time they get to that final check, that it becomes what Harry coined the phrase, it becomes a boring non-event, right? It's already been inspected so many times by then. There's really not anything new to see at that point. So I think if you take that in mind, that will avoid the waterfall thing, right? That really truly has been, even in the case of the airplane, right? The software, the avionics, everything has already been tested so many times in small batches and in increments as we went along, that even that final check ride, people have a lot of confidence that this is a quality aircraft and I have no problem getting on it and putting myself in the air.
Yeah, no, I know, absolutely. So again, I think I have time for one more question, but just to add on to that real quick. So from a version 1 standpoint, I look at work as being being work. We talked about it at the atomic unit of value. You can roll that up at different levels, but I think you're right about leaning up and making sure that you're not putting too much process or too much onus on people. But if you're doing it, if you're tracking work, a task or something, again, putting it in one solution and linking that in with your other pieces is going to be very useful. So. Just a real quick question on what metrics have you seen maybe at an Agile team level, maybe you can give one, that has been useful in highly regulated industries?
Yeah, so I'm going to assume, I saw the question, I'm going to assume they're talking about the Agile team's performance since it's what they specified. And I'm going to set aside, we know that the solution itself is going to have to meet the high assurance standards, whether we're talking about a medical device, an automobile, whatever, right? So those things have to pass. If we're looking at how do we measure an Agile team, so the things that I think are really critical are predictability and quality. Predictability, how consistently do they deliver the things they commit to every iteration in the iteration goals and every PI in their PI objectives, and you trend that out over time. That's the number one metric we teach in SAFE is your predictability measure, right? And that lets people know if the team commits, they're going to deliver. And then it's all the quality metrics. So how much automation do we have? How much is covered? What's our defect rate? How many escape defects? Well, how many refactors? And how frequently can we release? All those are kinds of things that are testaments to how good the team is at doing what they're supposed to do.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for taking all the time to present this today. Again, if you want to contact Steve, his details here are on the slide. We will be sending out the link to the recording as well. And if you want more information about version 1, you can go to our website there, which is listed on this page as well. And again, I just want to thank everybody for the great questions and for your attendance today. And Steve, I'll just hand it over to you to wrap up, and then we'll go ahead and finish up. So thanks again, Steve, and it's been great working with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. The last comment was just a reminder that, especially if you're in the D.C. area, we are going to be at National Harbor in October, and you're going to hear from lots of folks, including those that work in very highly regulated, high assurance environments. So you're going to get more intense exposure to all these good practices in just a couple of days than any other time. So definitely encourage you to register. And I think we're getting close to the end of our early bird rate, so you might want to jump on that sooner rather than later. And that's all I got,
Awesome.
Mark.
Thank you so much. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for attending. And again, we'll see you again at one of our next webinars. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.